Okay, so in the last 10 years, it has become increasingly popular to think of cocktails not as individual recipes, but as belonging to one of the basic cocktail templates that already exist. So, for example, you would say that a Manhattan is basically a martini with different ingredients, or depending upon who you talk to, those roles might be reversed. Another example would be a margarita is basically a sidecar, but with different ingredients. Well, today we're talking about the old-fashioned, but specifically a variation on the old-fashioned called a Sazerac. Now, there's a problem with saying that a Sazerac is a variation on the old-fashioned because it's too old, right? It does follow the kind of basic tenets, but it's a lot more specific, as well as historically, it didn't grow out of the old-fashioned. It kind of developed on its own, separate from the old-fashioned. Now, if you've never had a Sazerac, traditionally it would have been made with French cognac, but due to some things that happened in the cognac industry, like 150 so years ago, Americans started making it with rye whiskey. And depending upon the bartender you talk to, some will say that it's absolutely supposed to be rye, and others will say it has to be cognac. Today, I'm not going to make a cognac or rye Sazerac. I'm actually going to combine the two and make a hybrid recipe. I definitely did not come up with this, but it comes to us from what I think is the best written cocktail book, the Cocktail Codex. I think that kind of covers everything. Let's mix it up. I stand by my statement regarding the quality of this book, especially as a tool for the complete amateur like myself. But that said, its fundamental thesis, that all cocktails can be neatly broken into a few master template categories, is not without its controversy and detractors. But that's a discussion far above my humble pay grade. I actually have the bottled in bond version of the specified rye whiskey, but my cognac is completely different than what the recipe calls for. Now, it's excellent as far as cognacs go, so I'm sure it's going to be alright. Assembly happens in a mixing glass, starting with 4 dashes of Peychaud's bitters, followed by 1 dash of Angostura bitters. And no, I didn't just have an attack of the palsy. My bitters bottle is basically empty, and I'm trying to use my best guess at a proper dash and only pull out the new bottle if I need one, which I don't think I do. Next, Demerara gum syrup, 1 teaspoon. A properly made bar spoon should be exactly 1/2 teaspoon, so I need 2 bar spoons of syrup. Now the booze. 1.5 ounces of rye and 1/2 ounce of cognac. My beautiful new glass jigger has very limited measurement lines, so I'm going to measure 1.5 ounces of rye and then top the jigger the rest of the way to the 2-ounce line with cognac. That might have been a bit of a fat pour, but it'll be fine. The rye is 100 proof, so it'll stand up. Add a bit of cracked ice and a large solid cube, and then stir to chill and dilute. Remember that we want a bit more dilution than a typical old-fashioned, as the Sazerac is served up instead of sitting on a large rock of ice. Next, I need to add about 1/4 ounce of absinthe to a chilled lowball glass, and then tip the glass on its side and rotate it to fully coat the inside with the absinthe before dumping out the excess straight into my mouth. Man, I forgot how good that absinthe is. Strain the cocktail into the glass. Pull a lemon peel and express it over the drink and rub it on the sides before discarding it. And that is the Death & Co. Sazerac. Time to see if it's as amazing as I've heard. Alright, well, I've had Sazeracs before, but I've never had one with cognac, either a pure cognac Sazerac or a hybrid one like this. So I'm pretty excited. One of the funny idiosyncrasies about this drink is that it's meant to be served completely garnishless. There's no ice, there's no lemon peel, there's no cherry, nothing like that. It is very, very understated, I guess. It's so luxurious. Man, that is good. You do not have to like absinthe to like this cocktail. The absinthe is not present at all. All it does is, like, I guess, broaden the spice flavors that are already in your distilled spirits, your whiskey and cognac. And thinking about it, the biggest thing I notice about this Sazerac is that it is a little bit rounded off, and I think it's that 1/2 ounce of cognac. It's just a little bit easier on the palate than pure rye whiskey. I think it sort of broadens that flavor and makes it more, I don't know, approachable, more genteel even. I've got to go in for another sip. So the first thing you taste is that lemon oil that's on the top of the cocktail, and then you get hit with the whiskey flavor, and you notice how sweet it is. This is a pretty sweet cocktail, which is right up my alley. I cannot taste the difference between the Peychaud's and the Angostura and the absinthe. They all kind of become one in the drink and give you this just incredible baking spice note that devolves into the burn of the ethanol from the whiskey and cognac. And then on the end of it, you're left with this slightly bitter but sweet barrel spice kind of finish. All in all, I would give this a 10 out of 10. This is one of the best old fashions I've ever had. And if you guys want to be pedantic in the comments, I know a Sazerac is related to an old fashioned, but it really shouldn't be called an old fashioned because it is different enough. But let's be real, it's a kind of old fashioned, and in that entire family, so everything you can think of, you know, brandy old fashions, vermouth old fashions, whiskey old fashions of every type. Bourbon is like my love language, right? This might be the best old fashioned I've ever had. I think I would rate it up there with the Sherpa, which is probably the best bourbon old fashioned I've ever had. This is freaking incredible.